Callum Reed had spent 3 years alone on his land, content with the quiet rhythm of isolation. No neighbors, no passing riders, no eyes judging him. The fields were his companions, the work his solace, and he liked it that way. But that morning, as he checked the fence line near the east pasture, he froze. A woman on horseback sat 50 yards away, perfectly still, watching him. Her horse grazed lazily, yet the presence of this stranger sent his heart soaring and sinking at once. She was not from town. He knew every person there and her posture. Her clothes, the way she held the reins with effortless control, marked her as Apache. She looked at him directly, eyes sharp, calculating, assessing. Callum's hands tightened around the hammer he carried, unsure whether it was weapon or useless object. She moved closer, deliberate and unhurried, the fringes of her clothing catching sunlight as if signaling that she had come for a purpose, not by chance. 10 feet away, he felt the weight of her gaze, measured and precise, as though she could see every flaw and virtue at once. Then her voice came, calm and startling. "I want a child from you." The words struck him like a thunderclap, and the hammer slipped from his hand to the dirt. She did not soften them. She did not explain. She simply waited. Callum's mind raced with disbelief. No woman rode up to a stranger and demanded something so impossible, so intimate. He shook his head reflexively. She tilted her head, observing him with calm intensity. "You live alone. You work this land alone. No wife, no family nearby." Her words pressed against him like a weight he could not lift. When she dismounted, the details became undeniable. The beadwork on her clothing, a faint scar along her jawline, the absolute certainty in her eyes. She approached, giving him time to flinch, and touched his forearm lightly. That simple contact made him forget how to breathe. She was warm, alive, and unyielding. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said, mounting her horse. Callum remained frozen, realizing he did not even know her name. He wanted her to go, but another part of him, a quiet, dangerous part, wanted her to stay. That night, he lay awake, staring at the ceiling beams, replaying her words over and over. "I want a child from you." The audacity, the impossibility, and the simple, unwavering tone shattered the walls he had built around himself. By dawn, he had resolved that he would tell her no. He did not know her. She did not know him. He was nobody's choice. And yet, as he carried out his morning chores with mechanical precision, he saw her again, the same spot, the same stillness, horse grazing while she watched him. His carefully rehearsed refusal evaporated, and instinctively he walked toward her, drawn as if by gravity he could not resist. "I don't even know your name," he said, voice rough, and she replied simply, "Kiona." The name felt foreign, sharp, and alive. And as he looked into her eyes, he understood that something in his world had shifted forever, that isolation had ended before he had even chosen to allow it. The morning after Kiona's startling declaration, Callum woke to the soft murmur of wind through the prairie, each gust reminding him that the world beyond his solitude still moved, relentless and indifferent, yet somehow more urgent than before. He had spent years convincing himself that isolation was strength, that needing nothing from anyone meant he could endure anything. But Kiona had shattered that fragile conviction with 6 simple words. And now her presence lingered in every corner of his mind, in every shadow cast across the fields. her gaze and her purpose haunting him with an intensity he had never known. And when he ventured outside to check the horses, he found her waiting again, same spot, same calm resolve. The horse grazing as though time itself bent around her patience. And Callum felt a pull in his chest that was both terrifying and inexplicably thrilling, compelling him toward her, despite his carefully built defenses. She dismounted without haste, boots softly hitting the dirt, and he observed the meticulous beadwork of her clothing, the subtle scars that hinted at trials endured, the undeniable authority in her stance. And he realized that she was testing him as much as he was testing himself, silently measuring whether he could rise to the impossible expectations she had placed before him. And as the day progressed, the sky darkened with gathering storm clouds, a forewarning that nature itself mirrored the turmoil inside him, the rain promising both cleansing and challenge. And when the first drops fell, Kiona gestured toward the old roof of his small house, pointing out the rotted boards that would fail against the tempest. And Callum, pride warring with necessity, reluctantly climbed the ladder with her steadying hand beneath him, feeling the fear of height and the urgency of the moment collide, hammering nails into the decayed wood while the wind tugged at him, the rain lashing down, drenching both. Yet Kiona remained unwavering, watching, grounding him, her presence a quiet command, a challenge that could not be ignored. Each board replaced, each nail driven, each gust endured, became a test not only of skill but of character. And Callum felt the strange thrill of proving to someone, for the first time in years, that he could rise to meet expectation without faltering. The storm outside echoing the storm of his own heart, fierce yet purifying. When at last he descended the ladder, breath ragged, muscles trembling, Kiona caught his arm, and together they watched the downpour drench the prairie, lightning splitting the sky, thunder rattling the walls. Yet inside the house remained dry, safe, a small triumph forged by courage, trust, and shared determination. And as they finally entered the modest interior, soaked and shivering, Callum felt a warmth that had nothing to do with physical comfort, the fire of connection, of choice, of daring to face fear not alone but with someone who saw him, truly saw him. And the realization settled deep in his chest that the path ahead, deciding, committing, was as terrifying as it was necessary. That the challenge Kiona had set before him was not merely about survival or strength, but about proving to himself, to her, and perhaps to the world, that he could be worthy of trust, of partnership, of a life that demanded both courage and heart. And in that quiet, storm-lashed moment, standing beside her in the house they had defended from the tempest, Callum understood for the first time that the journey toward connection would be harder, wilder, and infinitely more rewarding than the solitary life he had once embraced. And he welcomed it with trembling hands, racing heart, and a mind suddenly alive with possibilities he had never dared imagine. Days passed, and with them came the shadow of Kiona's people, an invisible pressure pressing against Callum's chest that he could neither ignore nor escape. For the elders, the council, the voices of tradition, all weighed heavily on her choices and, by extension, on him. He had learned to read the wind, the habits of horses, the subtle signs of approaching storms. But nothing had prepared him for the scrutiny of those who measured worth not by quiet deeds but by heritage, strength, and obedience. And now, standing beside Kiona as they waited by the pasture, he saw them emerging over the ridge, 3 riders, older, poised with authority, their horses moving like shadows cast by judgment itself, Apache like her, yet carrying a weight of expectation that seemed to press down on every blade of grass and every shudder of his own heart. And Kiona's hand tightened around his, her eyes flicking to each rider with a sharp, calculating focus that betrayed the slightest tremor of concern, but no fear, not exactly. For her resolve was forged in trials he could only glimpse through the intensity of her gaze. And as they approached, speaking rapidly in their language, he caught only fragments, the sharp tones of the undercurrent of warning, and yet he felt the weight of their assessment as clearly as if it had been spoken in English, measuring him, challenging him, daring him to prove his worth or crumble beneath their judgment. And Callum realized then that this was not just about Kiona or him, it was about culture, legacy, survival, and the continuation of a way of life that depended on choices far larger than any single person. And he drew in a trembling breath, reminding himself that courage was not the absence of fear, but action despite it, as he stepped forward to stand beside her. Shoulders squared, though his pulse raced, heart hammering like the thunder that still lingered from the last storm. And he saw the older woman, her eyes like flint, judging, weighing, measuring, and when Kiona spoke in their language, firm but calm, there was a tension in the air that vibrated through every nerve in Callum's body, for he understood the stakes. One word, one gesture, one faltering step, and everything they had begun to build, the fragile trust and connection, could collapse like a house in a gale. Yet Kiona's hand in his, warm and unwavering, grounded him, giving him the strange, terrifying confidence to meet their gaze. And when the older woman finally shifted to English, her words sharp, demanding, warning that his presence, his actions, his very self could affect generations, Callum felt the responsibility settle like stones in his chest, heavy, undeniable, but also oddly clarifying, as though the universe itself had set this moment to separate him from the man he had been and beckoned him to become, the one worthy of trust, courage, and partnership. And Kiona's voice, low but steady, met theirs with calm defiance, protecting him as much as herself, articulating that strength was not always volume, that quiet patience and respect mattered, that the bonds forged in fire and choice were stronger than the chains of expectation. And as the riders finally withdrew, mounting and riding back over the ridge, leaving dust and tension behind, Callum felt a strange exhilaration, a recognition of himself he had never known, and he understood that courage, partnership, and choice were no longer abstract concepts. They were living, breathing realities he had to step into, fully unflinching, because the woman beside him had already done so. The following days unfolded with an intensity that Callum had never known, each sunrise bringing not only light but a challenge, a subtle reminder that the world outside his fields was alive with expectation and scrutiny. And Kiona, steadfast and unyielding, remained both his anchor and his guide. For every task she set before him, from repairing fences along the east pasture to hauling water for the wild horses at the property line, was imbued with a lesson, a test, a quiet demand for courage, patience, and resilience. He had grown accustomed to the solitary rhythm of farm life, the mechanical repetition of chores that left no room for hesitation. Yet now each movement carried weight beyond mere survival, as though the land itself bore witness to the choices being made, the strength being measured, and the character being forged in the crucible of shared purpose. And when Kiona called him to help with the storm-battered roof, the stakes were immediate, tangible, as lightning split the sky above, rain slicing through the prairie like shards of silver. And Callum, hands trembling, gripped the ladder while she steadied it below, her eyes steady and assessing, her presence demanding more than his skillet demanded his resolve. And each nail driven, each board replaced, became a testament to his ability to face fear without retreat, to act despite uncertainty, to trust in both his hands and the woman beside him, who refused to do the work for him, yet provided the quiet support that made it possible. And as the storm raged, water streaming down the sides of the small farmhouse, the wind howling through the cracks, he felt a surge of adrenaline and connection, realizing that every choice, every moment of deliberate action was reshaping him, redefining the man who had once lived alone, fearful and hesitant, and with each gust, each splintered board replaced. He understood that strength was not merely measured in physical endurance, but in presence, in courage to act when the world seemed indifferent, in willingness to expose oneself to risk for the sake of protection, for the sake of partnership, for the sake of love. And when at last he descended, soaked, exhausted, yet exhilarated, Kiona's hand found his, their fingers intertwining, grounding him, reminding him that the trials were not solitary, that the bonds forged in fire and labor were the true measure of trust and worth. And as they watched the storm move away, the prairie glistening in the aftermath, Callum felt a profound shift within himself, the solitude of years giving way to a newfound awareness that life, courage, and connection were inseparable, that the trials Kiona had brought to him were not merely tests of survival, but of character, and that he, for the first time in his life, could meet them fully without flinching, because beside him stood a woman whose faith, patience, and strength demanded no less. And he understood that the journey forward would be neither easy nor predictable. Yet it was theirs to face together, hand in hand, heart aligned with heart, ready to confront whatever storms, literal or metaphorical, might arrive. For, in the shadow of fear and rain, Callum discovered a truth he could no longer deny. Courage was contagious, trust was earned, and love was the fiercest, most transformative challenge of all. The morning sun rose over the prairie with a golden clarity that seemed almost celebratory, illuminating the land that had witnessed Callum's transformation from a solitary, hesitant farmer into a man willing to confront fear, embrace challenge, and trust in the strength of another. And as he stepped outside, he found Kiona already waiting, her posture calm but radiating determination, the air between them charged with unspoken understanding. For they both knew that the choices ahead were irreversible, that the promise of life, partnership, and legacy carried weight far beyond any individual desire. And as they walked together toward the small house, every step felt purposeful, every glance exchanged a silent vow, a recognition of courage earned and trust given freely, the prairie stretching endlessly around them, the wind carrying whispers of resilience. And when Kiona's hand brushed against his warm and grounding, Callum felt a surge of certainty that had been elusive for years. The certainty that he could stand beside her, protect, nurture, and share in the life they were building. For the child she carried represented not only the continuation of her people's heritage, but also a bridge between two worlds. And he understood that to honor that responsibility required more than physical labor or skill. It required heart, patience, wisdom, and the willingness to bend without breaking, to adapt without surrendering, to lead without imposing. And together they prepared for the days ahead, planning, talking, learning, and laughing in moments that were fleeting yet precious. And when the Apache elders returned, their expressions softened with cautious recognition, acknowledging the choices that had been made and the courage displayed. And Callum felt the weight of approval and expectation settle in a way that was neither burdensome nor frightening, but affirming, a testament to the growth he had undergone, the lessons learned, and the trust earned. And as the hours passed, they moved seamlessly between work and quiet reflection. The repairs on the farmhouse completed, the fields tended, and the animals cared for. Yet the most profound labor was of a different kind. The deliberate building of understanding, the conscious choice to embrace vulnerability and strength in equal measure. And when twilight fell, painting the prairie in hues of amber and rose, they stood together at the threshold of the house, hand in hand, feeling the steady rhythm of life within and without, the world continuing indifferent. Yet they had forged a space immune to doubt, a sanctuary built on mutual courage and unwavering trust. And in that quiet, sacred moment, Callum realized that he no longer feared solitude, storms, or the unknown, for he had discovered the transformative power of choice, the unshakable strength of partnership, and the extraordinary gift of love that demanded bravery, vulnerability, and unwavering presence. And as Kiona leaned into him, the child within her moving like a heartbeat, echoing their unity, he understood that the future, unpredictable, wild, and challenging, was theirs to shape together, a canvas painted with courage, commitment, and the enduring truth that when two hearts choose to face the world side by side, even the fiercest storms become bearable, even the most daunting challenges surmountable. And in the glow of the fading sun, with the prairie stretching endlessly around them, they shared a quiet kiss, a promise, and the profound knowledge that everything had begun the day she rode up to his fence and said 6 words that changed his life forever. "I want a child from you."